Hi, Dr. Pierce here. I'm going to show you the lab setup for the Catalase lab that you're going to be planning and carrying out over the next few classes. So what we're going to need to gather up here is we've got some 1% hydrogen peroxide that you will need. You will also need a sample of yeast solution. Okay. What Catalase does is it takes hydrogen peroxide, breaks it down into water and oxygen. That oxygen is given off as a gas. And so what we're going to try and do is sort of measure the amount of bubbles, okay, the height of the bubbles that occurs in this reaction vessel. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what you need to do here. We're just going to take a 5 ml syringe and grab 5 mils of hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide, if you get it on your fingers, will sting maybe a wee little bit, and it might turn your skin a little white. Sounds terrible, but it's not really too big of a deal. But you should wear safety glasses when you're dealing with this. Okay, so 5 mils. Into the tube. Okay, and the way we're going to help generate those bubbles is to add 1 drop of liquid soap, okay, just into the Catalase. That should be good enough just to help form those bubbles. Okay. So you want to mix it up a little bit. Do that by make sure that the detergent is well dispersed. Okay. Now, normally you would let the bubbles drift down a little bit, because what you want to do is to mark the base of the bubbles. So I'm going to mark that right there. Okay, so that's kind of the beginning spot of the bubbles. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and add the yeast, and that's going to start the reaction because yeast is a good source of catalase. Now, you need about 1 ml of yeast. If it's been a while since you used the yeast last, you should give it a good little swirl, because yeast sinks on the bottom of the flask, and you want it to be evenly distributed when you do your experiment. So I'm going to take a ml of this, milliliter of yeast, and we're all ready to go. Now, you need to do 2 things. Okay, you need to time the reaction, and then ultimately measure the height of the bubbles that are produced. Okay, so I've got my tube ready to go with hydrogen peroxide and a little bit of detergent, and now I'm going to add the yeast to that. Now I'm going to add the yeast at the same time that I start my stopwatch. Okay, so I'm going to start it, and we're going. Okay, now as the yeast reacts with the yeast and catalase reacts with the hydrogen peroxide, you will see slowly that you are forming bubbles, and that reaction is starting to rise. So you can see the bubbles are starting to go up here. Yeast might have been a little cold, but it's definitely working. Okay, so you see those bubbles go up. Now the question is, when do you stop it? You can choose that time. Generally speaking, what you want to try and do is stop it when the reaction starts to slow down. Okay, because you don't want extra time to go by when there's not much happening. But honestly, you can kind of pick a point anywhere where you want to stop it. Okay, but when you do, okay, you need to stop the timer and mark on your tube where those bubbles are. Okay, the height of those bubbles. So I'm gonna stop it now. Okay, so stop and measure on the line. Okay, so now I've got a starting and a stopping point. You can see that the reaction is still going on, but it doesn't really matter. Okay, I've got my time. I've got 1 minute and 6 seconds, so I'm going to turn that into seconds, and so that's 66 seconds. And I've got a ruler, and I can measure the height. So I'm looking at about 6 centimeters or 60 millimeters. And using both the height and the time, you can calculate a rate for your reaction. So your job is to now design a lab based on this particular setup to investigate a property of catalase that could change depending on your environmental conditions. So hope that works, and I will see you in class.